Welcome to The Sound of Economics, the podcast series by Bruegel, the Brussels-based economic think tank. I'm Giuseppe Porcaro, and we are here for the first episode of this season of The Sound of Economics Live to comment on the State of the Union speech delivered just a few hours ago, this morning on the 15th September 2021, by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. I'm here with Maria de Mercis, the Deputy Director of Bruegel, and Senior Fellows Alicia Garcia Herrero and Gregory Claes. Hello to all of you, and thanks for joining in. How are you?
Everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
And thanks a lot to our listeners as well, who can also join our conversation by asking questions on Slido using the hashtag Union. This year, the speech of Ursula von der Leyen was slightly shorter than last time, and we have seen Ursula using videos, slides, and even an honored guest as she invited Bebe Vio, the Italian Paralympic gold medalist, to join here at the European Parliament. But beside the form, the speech was covering a wide range of topics and policies, which we will try to unpack here. Or at least to give a first commentary. So the pandemic, vaccines rollout, and the recovery plans were clearly a headline. But before going into the specifics, I would like to ask you, what is your first general impression of the speech? Maybe starting with Maria.
Oh, yeah. Thanks very much, Giuseppe, and great to see Alicia again. Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that you thought it was... you can measure whether it was shorter or longer, but it felt long. I personally thought it was actually quite long. And probably I felt that because there was just so much packed into it. There's just so much to comment on. It was something for everyone. That is always entailing a trade-off for you. When you pack in quite so much in it, it means that you cover a huge array of topics, which is of course important because there isn't just one issue, there are many issues. But then you might actually lose kind of either the big picture or indeed what's really important here. I think so. That's basically my first impression. I would perhaps say one more thing. I think it started very strong, and I will explain why I think maybe as we talk about the different stories, why I think it started very strong. And kind of lost tempo, I think, towards the end. But I think the beginning was very, very strong.
Thank you, Maria. Alicia, your first impressions.
I quite agree with Maria. I think I was reviewing the notes from last year, and just to compare. And the tone last year was like ground tone, like basically social capital model, all of these things about, big themes. And probably it was too much last year. In fact, we made this comment last year that maybe there was a lot of ground theme, but not substance. This time around, I think our president made a quite detailed list, but in a way without a narrative. I found one narrative which I really like, which was this idea that we got together, comparing with the previous crisis, which is fine. But I would have pushed that further. I mean, we got together, but what else? We have now the momentum. What else do we need to do? And I felt that was missing. There were many small things here and there, but not that grand strategy as to what else needs to be done.
Thank you, Alicia. And Gregory, do you agree as well?
I think it's a difficult speech to write and to do, actually, because you need to talk both about the achievement of last year and also about the priorities for next year. I think she did great on the achievement. As Alicia said, I think she really focused on the right thing, on the recovery plan, on the vaccine rollout, which in the end was quite good. We can talk about that later. But talking about the priorities for next year, it looked more like a box-ticking exercise, where like there was a lot, and it was a bit sometimes unstructured and unfocused. So she mentioned a lot of stuff, and it's difficult to disagree with any of the stuff she mentioned. It's all very important. But she didn't give enough details on this. And for someone like me who work on macro policies, I think on that front in particular, there was not much substance. It was, okay, she mentioned the important stuff, but really en passant, as we say in French.
So let's say that there is a common understanding over there that there was a lot, and perhaps there were the right things were there, but there was very little elaboration. She didn't really give anything that was completely new in that speech. But perhaps if we go step by step on some of the issues, especially the ones that are more linked to our analysis at Bruegel, which are the things that are more linked to economic policy, and also to the analysis that we did in the past months, maybe we can uncover some of those aspects a little bit more. Perhaps starting with the big theme, which was the pandemic and the vaccine rollout. Of course, this was perhaps the part that was better crafted, as you just said, because it was the big achievements of the vaccines rollout, especially now after the summer, in terms of the numbers that we have comparing to the rest of the world. So this gave the possibility to her to really give a boost as well of the tone on the beginning of the speech. I don't know what kind of more specific reflections we could make on this first part, Maria.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say again, because I thought that the start was very strong. There is a lot to celebrate here. And I think in the 1 year period, and she's right to put it up there, in my view, and celebrate it. I mean, if you think about the achievements of last year, given also the challenges, it's really something to be very proud of. The vaccine rollout, the NextGenerationEU, the Green Deal, these are big things. These are not small things. And Europe moves in small steps. And yet, in this 1 year, a lot had happened. So she had a lot of material to put at that beginning, which I thought was very, very deserved. And what Alicia said about the togetherness, I thought that was excellent also to put that right up there. And also set a tone for what we need to do as we move ahead. The together part, I thought, was very well done. And also because it was at the beginning, it caught my imagination, which I thought was really very, very useful. Two more notable things about the start and basically looking backwards, which I think we all agree was very strong. The young were up there at the beginning. Quite clearly, she's looking at the next generation of people to solve the problems which are lying ahead. And I think that, quite frankly, that's the right thing to do. And the other thing, Africa showed up at the beginning of this discussion. Africa came up later on. But I think broadly than Africa, which I think is very important to begin with, is the idea that now we really need to solve the issue of vaccination globally. And she was very proud to say that Europe had done its bit to help in this context. But that really is now number one priority as we move forward. So I thought all of these elements were the right elements for celebrating what has happened in the past and setting the tone for the future.
Thank you, Maria. Alicia.
Yes, I like to add on this issue of the global challenges and the order of discussion on the vaccine front. So basically, quite interesting to me to see that first she mentions the global challenge and what we're doing about it. And then next, to continue with our own vaccination drive, and then the health union as kind of a consequence. But, if you think about it, this would be a very different order anywhere else in the world. Yeah, I mean, we could argue that this is the case because we've done so well on vaccination in Europe. But, somehow I felt that the whole thing could have been organized better. So basically, yes, we are major producers and exporters. So on the one hand, because there's two things here, donation, exports, what we've kept, why, justify, because, we tend to forget Europe was heavily criticized because of this. So if she had made a point first, why did we do it? Now we are ready. Now we are ready for the rest of the world. I think it would have been much more powerful. It would have, in a way, justified what was a heavy criticism for Europe. So in a way, I felt that a little bit of a missed opportunity. I understand overall it was a good start, but I think she could have explained what happened and why we did what we did and why we are now ready for Africa and others.
If I may, I think on the vaccines, I think she did the right thing. And she really showed that we as Europeans did the right thing, because as Alicia said, there was a lot of criticism at the beginning of the year towards the Commission. There was a lot of difficulties in the beginning of the rollout. And there was a lot of controversy also on the different paths that Europe was taking from the US, because the US was basically deciding not to export anything, not to donate anything, and to vaccinate its population first, while we decided that we would try to do both at the same time. And at the beginning, it seemed like a very risky bet. And really, myself personally, I was a bit worried about this. But in the end, it worked well. And we are now more vaccinated than the US, more vaccinated than the UK. And at the same time, we managed to export, as she said, half of the doses. Now we are donating a lot of doses. So in the end, Europe did very well on this. So it was good for her to show that it was a bit of a revenge, I guess, on her part. And it made sense to really focus on that.
If I may move on the next big topic, which is connected to this, which is the economic recovery, which is also more of a bread and butter for us at Bruegel. She also made something of a proud statement about the approach that the union managed to have so far in terms of managing the emergency situation, but also the longer term approach with the NextGenerationEU, of course. She made a very specific claim, which I would like to ask to you and put it as a challenge in this commentary. She claimed that 8 years were needed to recovery to go back to pre-crisis levels after the global financial crisis back in 2008. And then she forecasted that 19 member states will be at pre-pandemic level in 2022, and that the others will catch up by the end of 2023. I found that statement, for both the comparison with the global financial crisis and the forecast part, quite interesting in terms of asking you what's your take on that specifics.
What she said is factually correct, so there's no dispute there. I think what I think we could discuss is who deserves the credit for it, and there is lots of differences between the two crises that account for it, as well as kind of factually in the sense of the crises are different, but also the response was different, in which case credit may be due. But to start with, this is a very different crisis to the financial crisis. This is not a crisis of imbalances, which was the financial crisis. This is a crisis we just simply turned the economy off. We just switched the button off, and now we're switching it back on. And I think that's a very different starting point for the recovery to be able to be had. Europe as an architecture has evolved dramatically in the past 10 years. So, we are better capable of taking decisions that are more collective by comparison to the financial crisis, and quicker. So there, I think, yes, so there is something to celebrate. I think that's important. She made a very big deal about not making mistakes of the past. So that's also, we're learning in the process. So all of these account for the difference, the factual difference between the recovery speed this time around and the previous round. I mean, I personally don't think that we should dwell on this very, very long. It's exactly what we should be doing. We should be looking for ways for the recovery to come back fast. So, for me, it's not as important as perhaps the attention it got, given that it came up very early in her speech.
If I can add to this, yeah, I think actually it's a bit complacent to say that what von der Leyen said, because what we highlighted in a paper that we wrote for the ECOFIN, I think it was in May with Maria, Jolt and Guntram, is that it's true that the EU is going back to its pre-crisis level this year or next year for some countries, but it's still lagging the US and China in that regard. The US is already above its pre-crisis level and is going to be even above the pre-crisis trend. So actually the forecasts of today are better for the US than they were before the crisis. And it's not the case for the EU. As long as the forecast, as long as you are looking at the forecast for 2022, 23, we will still be below the trend we had before the crisis. So we still lose from the crisis. So I think we shouldn't be complacent about that. So I think it was a bit too much what she did by claiming victory and comparing it to the previous crisis.
Yes, quite agree. Again, what I said at the very beginning is that, yes, of course, thanks God we didn't repeat what we did then. For me, we had this discussion before, what was shocking, and if I may say, is that we still really put on paper that we thought then that we had actually overcome a crisis that was so obvious to everybody. Yeah, I mean, and Maria, given your origin, I'm sure you realize how short-sighted the whole thing was. So putting that as a benchmark is quite something, because it was so bad, let's face it. And therefore, I think, okay, once you say that, I think you probably would say, okay, we were smart enough to realize that wasn't the way, and we've done all of this, but lots of other things are yet to be done, because if not, we basically think we're done with and as you said, we've recovered the pre-crisis levels, but that's not going to ensure sustainable growth in Europe. We have to do so many more things to get there. And I think that part, in my view, was missing. So I do agree it was a bit complacent.
Well, thank you. I have to say that after this big moment at the beginning that flowed quite, seamless between the analysis of the pandemic, the response to the vaccines, and the economic growth and recovery, then she started a little bit of a tick boxing exercise that you've been mentioning before. But some of these tick boxing exercises is definitely interesting to go through. For instance, one of the big headlines of that section of the speech was definitely the announcement on semiconductors and semiconductor strategy, which has implication for many aspects when it comes to global value chains, but also about in her wording about the autonomy, strategic autonomy of the continent. So perhaps as well, not to follow the same pace of the speech, but somehow to give a glimpse on each of these themes, I would like to ask a commentary on that point. What can we say? Because that seemed to be one of the few announcements of a big strategy ahead for the EU.
Yeah, if I may say something on this, yes, I think you're right to pick on this issue, because I think that's perhaps one of the most interesting things in this. What I also totally agree is a box ticking exercise. The semiconductors is important. It was actually used in the context of what she named as tech sovereignty, which is part of the bigger discussion on the sovereignty that we have in the EU. But I think putting it in that context was actually quite powerful, because it links, as far as I'm concerned, to economic issues which are crucial. And the issue of the semiconductors right now is that we are very vulnerable as we don't produce them. And that, of course, blocks our ability to sort of, produce. So the fact that we need to think about the semiconductor industry in a way that is going to robustify our production process is a very nice way and effective way, in my view, of putting the subject on the table. So, and then she announced the European chip plan on creating what she called an ecosystem. I think this is very important. It squares very nicely with the objectives of the NextGenerationEU fund, which is the digital aspect of it. What do we invest in the future? And quite frankly, it is one way of robustifying the European economy. So I think that's very good news. And it's one takeaway message that I think is a very positive one.
But how realistic it is, and I'm looking at Alicia, especially from her observatory in Asia, how realistic it is that Europe can catch up globally on this.
I quite agree that with Maria that we will only know if we try. Number one, I mean, we do have to do something about this. I think just think about it. Yeah, we are in essence the largest exporter in the world as a region. But the type of products that are increasingly going to be exported are no longer, the ones we're able to produce. So in a nutshell, unless you give up on that and you become a service economy and you do all of those changes that might not be, frankly speaking, great for productivity based on what has happened elsewhere, you need to do something about this. And I think we're not the only ones. Yeah, I mean, everybody on Earth, or every major economy on Earth, has a plan to deal with the semiconductor shortage. Most importantly, the falling behind in the technology, especially as regards foundries and fabs, and this is part of the proposal. So I mean, the fact that this money is going to be spent or squandered, which many argue, to me, it's not a very strong argument because we're already seeing money coming in. Yeah, we're seeing Intel, for example. We're seeing reaction to money being put on the table. It's not only public money. So I do think this is a strategy. I can't judge whether it could have been designed better, but the essence of it, I do think it's something we should do. However, I think she makes a little bit of a confusion, or at least to me, of what digital sovereignty versus tech sovereignty is about. Yeah, investment in digital is all about basically the government be more digital, public be more digital, companies be more digital, industrial digitalization, all of these things. Yeah, but a very different thing is basically your ability to be economically independent. And we could talk about, all of the concepts that she doesn't mention very strongly this time around, which is a contradiction, if you see what I mean. So she puts all of that together, but these are very different stories. One thing is whether we can catch up technologically speaking. The other thing is whether we can be more digital. And she seems to me to kind of pull all of that in the same basket. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if Gregory has some points to add.
Very quickly, no, I think it was very good to touch on that point because it's a very timely topic. However, it's always difficult to know what will be in that European Chip Act and what it will do to really make this ecosystem emerge. Because actually there have been plans like this in Europe and in different countries of Europe for the last 20 years and nothing happened. So we cannot judge now if it's going to work or not. I saw that actually Thierry Breton just published a blog post after the speech where he tried to explain on which point the EU should focus. And I think there is a strong focus on research. I think focusing on research and financing of research is a good idea, actually. And that's the best that the EU can do. And there can be also some good synergies with NGU. So that could be good.
So next box of Ursula was the European economic governance, the fiscal rules, which is, the big elephant in the room for many in the debate around economic policy at the moment. And I have actually a question from one of our listeners, Sarah, on this. And she's asking, how realistic is a consensus on fiscal rules by 2023, which is, again, one of the bold statements that the president of the Commission had during her speech on this regard. Maybe this time I would like to start with Gregory.
Yeah, reaching a consensus, I think it's going to be difficult, but it's essential because before we start looking into the plumbing and saying, oh, we need to change that rule in particular because it's not working well, etc., I think we need to decide what we want to do with this reform. What's the goal of it? Is it to simplify? Is it to allow for more public investment and in particular for more green investment? Is it to give more fiscal space in general to countries? So we need to decide what we want to do. And then after that, we will come as Bruegel and as economists and look at the plumbing once they have decided. But at that point, it's true that in her speech, it was still very vague, but we know why. The elephant in the room is the German election. And all of this basically relies on what will happen in 2 weeks in Germany, because it will be very different if it's a coalition that is led by the Socialists, the Greens, or the CDU. So I think we are waiting for that. Once there is a coalition in Germany, then they will have a position and then we can try to reach a consensus. But before that, it's difficult. So let's wait for having someone at the helm in Germany. And after that, we reach a consensus. And after that, we'll look at the plumbing.
Any further comments from Alicia and Maria?
Yeah, just a very quick comment from me on. I think she gave the subject. In terms of kind of the importance she gave to the subject, it was just one line, as Gregory says, on passing, right? Mm-hmm. So this is just actually an acknowledgement of the fact, saying, listen, I know this is a big debate. I know it's coming. We need to agree. let me say something else, because I mean, what else could she say, given, of course, the uncertainties that Gregory discussed. So I think, I would have liked to have her hear a little bit more, but actually there wasn't much more to say on the subject other than this is one big fight and we're going to have it.
Indeed, I completely agree with you on this. Next point I wanted to touch, Maria, you mentioned it at the beginning about youth that was used many times, and there was an acknowledgement about the challenges of the younger generation during the pandemic, but also some further announcement regarding a new program for the NEET, the people not in education, neither on training. In that specific case, she announced the name, which is ALMA, something similar to what we can imagine at the moment, something similar to the Leonardo part of the Erasmus Plus, which is already currently providing placements for professional vocational training within the EU. What to make out of this? I mean, of course, it came back several times so it's more of a cross-cutting point rather than a specific one. Maria.
Yeah, indeed. I actually think she gave the speech was very much forward-looking in this respect. So the young need to be looked after because the young suffer, the young have to solve the problems. I was very impressed by this project ALMA. Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, but ALMA means soul, right?
I think so.
Because it does, right? And actually remember the first metaphor she used at the beginning of her speech, Europe needs a soul. I thought it's like a little bit of poetic things coming into the speech. Look, I mean, it was actually, the reason why I'm impressed is because, if you think of one program that has been very successful in Europe, that was Erasmus. And that is actually something that we should emulate. And the fact that they're now trying to do this on the professional side, for me, this is what low-hanging fruit. It ticks all the right boxes in terms of who it benefits, and it is forward-looking, and it's a non-brainer. So very happy to hear about that.
Very well, very well. Something else about the youth side of the speech that either Gregory or Alicia would like to add on this?
I think the plan is good, but and this brings me to her call on the single market, as if it were perfect. This is the very same thing. I mean, we can start pushing mobility anytime, the sooner the better. But there's one thing we need to do beyond pushing mobility is that to make sure that there's a single market labor-wise, for the vocational training. So in a way, she avoids in this speech, in my opinion, the big questions. And this is one. I mean, you put a little bit of a patch there, and you find a few funds here and there to move people around. But what if their titles are not fully? Some are, some really aren't, and we know that. We know for a fact that there is still a lot of barriers. So again, I would have preferred acknowledging. I don't mean solving the big issues remaining at hand. The big challenges we still have to create a single market, blah, blah, blah. And then say, okay, for the time being, this is what we're going to do. And then we hope to move forward because it lacks the context of where we are. For me, this is like, again, one thing, but where are we? That's my comment.
And it's true that if you want to create a single market for labor, you will have to do more than these tiny programs like ALMA. Even if, it's encouraging to do that, it might be good. It might help some people that were not included in Erasmus to feel more European. So that's good from a cultural perspective. But still, if you want to create a single market for labor, you need to reduce the heterogeneity, for instance, of pension system, of social security in general, of unemployment. All of these are very different, and having a career in different EU countries is still very complex. And I guess all of us here in this can note that we have no clue what our pension will be. So it's not a single market.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, indeed. Moving on to another box and a big one, I would say, which is climate. She spent quite some time on this, rightly so, very important and urgent part of the EU policies, of course, connecting it on the Green Deal, but also it was linked to more a global stance of Europe. And she mentioned China and she mentioned COP26 for obvious reasons. And as well here, I mean, if I might say, I didn't feel that she made any kind of new announcements or any new things. I guess that it's quite hard to comment on substance over there, because there was more of like a reiteration of commitments which were made earlier on with Fit for 55 and the other commitments which were already done and which we commented already at Bruegel. But perhaps still it's worth to have a very short round on that part. And especially for Alicia, if I might ask her the first place, because she clearly mentioned the 30-60 targets that China had set up, and she clearly mentioned them in the speech. So it was something that caught my attention, and I would like to ask your take on this.
Yes, not only that she mentioned that, but she also very subtly, superstitiously, or I can't even pronounce that word, but very, very, in a very cunning way, just says we're doing our work, but something like not everybody is. I mean, in a much nicer way, but she does say that. And I think that's quite something. I like that part, in the sense that, yes, I mean, if anywhere you go in the world, if there's anything for which Europe really stands out, I mean, frankly speaking, this is climate, and people are increasingly aware of a much stronger resolve from Europe as opposed to Asia or even the US. So, however, I frankly think that although she did repeat a few of the new measures, I may be wrong, but I just couldn't find, a good defense, let alone even a comment on the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which we should defend, because we've made a choice. Yeah, we've made a choice, a risky choice. This might be something that for Europe is anathema. I mean, something that might go against the WTO, for God's sake, But if we'd made that choice, now we need to really stand behind this and explain the world why this is important, not only for Europe, but that it should be replicated elsewhere. Actually, I heard recently that the Indonesians are looking into the CBAM to see whether they can actually, because they have the same problem. They import carbon leakage in Indonesia is humongous because of all of the imports from China, and the very same thing as in Europe. So my point is that yes, it's good. She reviewed everything we've been doing, but she could have been a little bit more pushy in defending the part of our strategy that is criticized. Let's face it, we had our annual meeting, and what we heard from the WTO chair was, be careful with this, outright there. So this is the time to say, why should I be careful? I'm doing something good for the world. You should follow. So I think I missed that part in a way in the climate change part.
Maria, I don't know if you want to add something on the climate, because I had another question, which is somehow linked to what Alicia was discussing about, which comes really on the stance of Europe in the world. Because the other thing that she announced in that part of the speech was this global global gateway partnership. And we have a question from Catherine from our audience, which is asking us to comment on this idea of global gateway partnership, which I have to admit I didn't really hear a lot of substance within the speech myself, but Perhaps we can have a few words on this.
Yeah, this is perhaps one of the, if I may call them, the newer things in the list of things that we are hearing. It has to do with connectivity and how do we connect ourselves in order to promote global trade. There were aspects in her speech that were clearly against China. I mean, there was, she mentioned a very clear example that, what's good in us having a company connecting two ports in the EU if they're both owned by China. She made a mention of that, which was actually rather bold in my view. Unlike what Alicia said on the climate, when she wasn't quite so bold, perhaps, on the climate. So there she was actually rather bold, I thought, in this respect. I mean, I think it's important not to lose kind of the big picture here. We're talking about open trade. We're talking about a global multilateralism, and to sort of say that have kind of almost a protectionist tone. I wouldn't go that far as call it protectionist, but there was elements of it. It's like we have to sort of protect. I thought that was a little bit in need of further clarification, in my view. It's a project that I don't know much about. I think but it is an important one in terms of completing the single market, ensuring some of robust economic outcomes, in the way that we produce goods. But other than that, I don't have much else to say on the thing. But I think something to watch certainly in the future.
Maybe one reflection that we could make on this, as you mentioned, Maria, that was a clear reference to the Belt and Road Initiative when she discussed about that. China's, for our listeners, Belt and Road Initiative is a China initiative of infrastructure building across the world for enhancing their own trade and flow of goods. And we at Bruegel, we've been looking at the Belt and Road on several occasions. On the other hand, somehow we've been hearing a lot of initiatives from the EU side on not directly, but somehow responding to this Belt and Road Initiative. And this seems to be the last name of one of those initiatives that have been seeing the light or not seeing the light in the past few years. Alicia, maybe a comment on that regard, more like retrospectively about what has been the reaction of Europe so far to the Belt and Road. I know that we can have a full podcast on this, but a very short one.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. You are so right, Giuseppe, because I can't even count the names of all of the initiatives we've taken, some of which, by the way, I just discovered even before the Belt and Road Initiative was created as a way to kind of make a step, perhaps in comparison to the US at the time. So we had the most recent, this was indeed a direct response to the Belt and Road Initiative, was the EU connectivity strategy. I mean, the next plan of the EU connectivity strategy, which, by the way, we reviewed for Japan only in 2019. So basically, you could have continued on that theme, at least for people to get to know what it is. Not only that, I have to say that as recently as June, we had the G7 meeting in which the Build Back Better World, B3W. I don't know who came up with this acronym because it's impossible to remember. But this B3 world was something that quite a few European countries, supported only in June. So why aren't we kind of going this route and we're creating our own initiative, which by the way existed already? This is what I was saying. I mean, this is the Global Getaway initiative. Fine. There was the EU Getaway program since 1990 for Europe to get closer to Asian countries. And it's been 30 years. Nobody knows about this, to be frank. I was just reading, like the usual pamphlet. It created 5,000 works. I mean, jobs. I mean, like this initiative risks being a little bit of that one. I mean, something that nobody will remember in the next State of the Union. And I think that's a missed opportunity because we lose credibility. Either we go G7 and we go full win and we say we support the G7 strategy and we need to do this. And the alliance of the like-minded, or you name it. Yeah, I mean, or we go back to our origins. Since 1990, we've been doing this, but we're going to do it better. It's not a response. It's not containment. It's our strategy. We have a strategy for Asia. We are a big economy. We do have to have a strategy for Asia. So, I felt that if you want to contain, then go to the G7 story. Don't create a new one 3 months later. So I just felt, gosh, and again, something you've not even talked about. It's like a balloon, yeah? You throw the balloon, you hope it will fly, but it's just a balloon. I really like this one.
Thank you, Alicia. On this, we are clearly on foreign policy territory, on the external action of the EU, and the whole final part of the speech was pretty much dedicated to that, with quite a big time spent on foreign policy, on Afghanistan, on defense, the defense, cybersecurity, and much more. It will be important before we close this commentary, at least to say a few words on those other aspects as well that were touched upon. And I would like to ask Maria to give us her thoughts on that part of the speech.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's clearly that. Well, let me just perhaps go a step back. If you think about the European Union, we have a monetary union. We are hoping to have a health union. And now we are also hoping to have a kind of a defense union, with strong aspects of the cyber. Look, this is overwhelming. And it's important to understand that, it's overwhelming to listen to, let alone achieve. Now, that said, I think, the need for understanding how to defend is crucial. I mean, how can we ever talk about autonomy if we don't have aspects of defense as part of it, And so that's correct. So I think it is a beginning of a conversation. We cannot put defense union at quite the same level as health union or indeed monetary union in terms of implementation. This is, one is a reality, monetary union, the other one is in the making, and defense union is probably a dream. However, there are aspects of it. First of all, it's an important discussion to have. It is the start of a conversation. And in fact, the announcement of the Summit on European Defense with President Macron in the French presidency is actually a good thing to say. We're thinking about this and we are serious about it. But I think to think of it as a defense union is probably something that would put a lot of people off. There are aspects of it, however, that are crucial to talk about, and we can make small steps. I think the cyber part should be the first one to be addressed, and it should be linked better to the digital. Not to the digitalization, but to the digital aspect, because it is about it comes through the digital. The transmission comes through digital. So I think the cyber part is an important part, and to be discussed not only in the context of defense, but also in the context of connectivity. So I think that one is a very important one. There are aspects of the neighborhood, and she made a number of interesting examples there that have got defense elements to it. Ukraine. She talks about enlargement and accession. She gave a very nice emphasis to this, which I thought was a very nice, a nice spin. Also, again, linking it to the young, which was again an interesting choice of connectors. So I think that's also an important. And then, of course, she went broader than this. She talked about Afghanistan, which was, of course, is the order of the day. She talked about the US and the role of the US and the sudden departure of the US. I thought that was an interesting mention. The fact that she even has. We need to consider, what it means to have such a sudden departure from Afghanistan. These are aspects that, of course, I'm sure in the Brussels corridors have been discussed, but in the context of the EU taking a position. These are bold things that we don't know how to deal with them. So, I would see that part of the speech as a sort of a reminder that we need to talk about these things, but not as a concrete step. Look, this is what the European Union is going to do anytime soon.
Thank you, Maria. I think that we are going towards the end of this conversation, these episodes. of course, there will be much more commentaries coming up and analysis, which can be more in depth. But of course, this was just the first, first reaction a few hours after the speech. And in order to conclude, perhaps I would like to ask you just some final thoughts about what we've been listening to. We started with this a general consideration, and it would be good to end, or perhaps to add anything that we might have been missing, because as we say, there were a lot of more things that were mentioned, and that also for time, space, and analysis, we cannot, word by word analyze every single aspects of this dance speech. So yeah, I don't know if you have some more additional. Yeah, I would like to give Alicia the word.
Yes, I mean, sorry, I really want to add something on Afghanistan. I'm sorry that it's not like a final conclusion on the whole thing we've discussed, but it's so important for me as a European. Actually, we had a discussion last night with Professor Kreiser at Harvard Kennedy School on exactly the point of his disenchantment with Europe because of not being aware of something that was very clear to everybody who had been followed, that basically both Biden and Trump were in agreement on one single thing in the campaign, which is withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that even the date was there. It happened slightly earlier, but it was going to be September. Come on, where are we in Europe as regards our security? I mean, we sometimes say that we've offshored so many things and we've not developed the semiconductor industry. What a problem! We need a chip act, because we have literally given away our security today. We basically said we rely on you, we forget about it. It is really dramatic to me to understand as a European that we're on our own, frankly, and that we've not yet even made any major movement. I still remember when we announced PESCO. Wow, it looked like the end of the world, PESCO. Now nobody, it seems like it's gone, and we need to restart conversations, as Maria said. Excuse me. I mean, as a European, I don't feel protected. I should tell the president that it's nice to have all of these things, but frankly speaking, I want to be protected. So Europeans should start asking. People should start asking, what are you doing about my security in this world, where with Russia right there, with and a very, frankly speaking, much more. Put it this way, an emerging, let's use this way, China with what it takes, where are we? And with the US basically, leaving anything that it has in its hands with our help, by the way. So where are we? So my final word, Giuseppe, is that this should now come to the people. Isn't this the Europe of the people? People want protection. I think people are scared about what's happening. And this is going to have a heavy burden, in my opinion, as things evolve on our commission and on those who need to decide to take action on things that we still miss, such as security and frankly defense. That's what we are.
Maybe I can add a couple of final thoughts. I mean, look, the issue of security, of course, is so important, but it's so closely also linked to identity and sovereignty. And these are not things that you can change or you can move on in sort of big leaps. I mean, it requires cultural adaptations that I think cannot happen from one day to the next. But I think, Alicia is right in saying that the citizens would, it needs to come to the level of the citizen. Most things do, but this one is so essential that, if the citizen is what they want, we need to react to that. Since we're talking about a presidential speech, I like to perhaps mention also the two things that were there and very welcome. And this is the issue of human rights, forced labor, women, and the violence against women. I think these were very important aspects. They were there. They're very much appreciated. And, if they hadn't been there, they would have been very much missed.
Thank you. And on this note, I would say that unfortunately, we have to close this conversation. And I would like to thank both of you, Alicia and Maria, and also Gregory, that had to leave a little bit earlier. And as usual, I would like to remind our listeners that they can read in open access all the analysis by our scholars on our website, www.bruegel.org. And I would like to thank everyone for joining The Sound of Economics. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.